Hi, everyone. This is Vanessa, also known as the International Immigrant, and welcome to my podcast. This is a place where we discuss everything immigration related, from the desire to work in another country for a few years to test the waters, to studying abroad in the hopes of opening up some opportunities, and of course, a full immigration with a cargo container of furniture and a residence visa stamped in your passport. If this is your first time and you want to know who I am and why I started this podcast, please watch or listen to the first episodes, as there are both audio and video versions available. My guest today, Alyssa, is one of my dearest friends. Oh, I love her, and you will too. And we were placed in each other's lives when we both needed it the most. We developed a wonderful and supportive friendship and spent many hours together along with her awesome husband, Andy, in their basement in Canada, laughing and talking about just about everything. She has 2 gorgeous kids under 5, but it has been tough to be in a new place during a pandemic, unable to meet new people or create social circles to get her through. So today, we're going to chat about our experiences as immigrants in a pandemic and our individual challenges that we have both faced over the last year. So please welcome my wonderful friend, Alyssa. Hey, honey, so good to have you here with me. I'm so happy.
Me too. I'm so excited.
Oh my God, this was supposed to be, for those listening or watching, this was actually supposed to be the first episode in the mental health series. I was so excited about it. But as we'll discuss further now, there have been some difficulties for both of us, but we are eventually here. Sometimes I record these in advance, but today I am recording it on a Monday, and you guys will see this will be released on a Friday, so it's fresh off the press. But please just introduce yourself. Let us know where you're from and your current situation.
Yeah, so I'm Alyssa. I am originally from Chesapeake, Virginia, right on the coast of Virginia, Chesapeake Bay. Was a total beach bum growing up. I've lived all over the US, and I thought that would prepare me for living out of the US. And even though it doesn't seem like I went anywhere exotic, I went to Canada, which is very similar to the US. It doesn't look different or anything. It was hard. So right now my husband's on a work visa. We are in Canada for at least 2 years, possibly more. It just depends on his job. So, and while we were there, I'm not allowed to work there. So I'm strictly at home, which right now is perfect since my kids are young. So I get that opportunity to stay home, even though sometimes I want to pull my hair out. So we've been there for, I guess, 1.5 years now. We moved there in February 2020, right before, like a month before they shut everything down in Canada for COVID.
Wow.
And it's been a ride, a real ride. So, yeah.
And so, so you just mentioned that Canada was the first place that you lived outside of the US. Okay.
Yeah, it's not even the first place that I lived outside the US. It was my actual first time stepping outside of the US, period. Okay. I mean, I think it's so easy to not go out of the US because since it's so different from one part to another, and there's just so many places to go, it's easy to just stay. But it was my first experience out. I think I was expecting more snow, more like Yetis or something. But it's normal.
Well, soon you'll be stepping out of the US, potentially to Mexico, or at some point in time for a little break. I know it'll be great.
Definitely.
So how did you find it when you first got to Canada? Okay, so you mentioned you got there in February 2020. I know because I was living there. So I know that on the 16th of March, I know this, the day before St. Patrick's Day that year, they asked us to shelter in place. And they started working at then reducing everything to essential services only. So they asked us to shelter in place. on the 16th of March. We didn't know each other at the time. How did you find it when you first got to Canada?
When we first got there, I was really surprised because stuff hadn't shut down first. So everything was still bustling. And it was weirdly just like the town I grew up in, where it's a town surrounded by farm field. So it was, I was excited because it was something I knew and I felt comfortable, especially once we got into our new place and settled in. And then when they said, I mean, it was scary because at first, you know, you had seen on the news numbers were rising around the world. And then all of a sudden, then they were starting to telling us to stay home. And we didn't know much at that point. So I was nervous. I didn't know the healthcare system really well at all. And it's different. So I didn't know if I did need to go to, you know, a clinic or something, what the protocol was, how that works in Canada. So it was honestly nerve-wracking when everything first started happening because I hadn't even had a chance to acclimate to normal there in Canada before we were thrown out of it.
Right.
So that was hard. But you know, I just tried to stay really busy unpacking the house and, you know, I was really good. I only sent my husband out to the grocery shopping. We didn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was just hard at first because I didn't know anyone at all. So it was hard because it was just like, wow, we're really going to have to depend on just ourselves. Like there's no backup plan right now, which was scary.
And you don't know anyone, and it doesn't matter whether the culture is similar. If you don't have other support systems, I mean, Andy is great and he's just such an amazing partner and you guys are so perfect from what I've seen. I really do think so. But you've got these two babies. I mean, you know, Bo was under 1 at the time and Ellie was just turned 3, I think. And so, you know, she's just this bundle of energy. And, you know, you've got these kids stuck inside. And I mean, I know it was like winter, but I mean, that's got to be a little bit difficult as well, because they must have been driving you stir crazy.
It was hard because I had just had Bo. I had Bo in December. So I was still, I mean, physically, I was pretty much healed at that point. And I mean, he was such an easy baby, so that was nice. But still, it was just like trying to get used to having 2 kids and, you know, getting used to that was, you know, hard in itself. And then doing it without really like my normal support group was hard.
I can understand that, trust me, because it was weird for me because I basically lived 6 months of a pandemic lifestyle. Effectively, I got there in September 2019. I've said in my first podcast that I was kind of in a relationship at that time, and then it ended a couple of months later. She'd gone back to the US. And so I was all alone, effectively, apart from, you know, befriending the guy who owned the house. And then I made friends basically 1 week before we were asked to shelter in place. So I'd made these friends. It was great. We were going to do some things, and then boom, you can't do anything. And fortunately for me, I kind of drove these 2 friends that had never met each other. I kind of pulled us into this sort of little 3 Musketeers type of thing. And we sat in the backyard. It was getting warmer and we kind of played some board games and we barbecued and we had the fire pit going, and we do it every 2 to 3 weeks. And we kind of saved each other through these beginning days of the pandemic. But I know how you feel when you say, like, everything that you know and all of your normal support system is gone, and you don't even have somebody that you can just ask to come over for a glass of wine and just, you know, just relax.
Yeah, exactly. And it was just like, because then also even people who I think were, you know, family members weren't getting together, stuff like that. So I think even people who had lived, you know, in Canada their whole lives and had a group of friends, they also felt just as isolated because, I mean, we were all so worried that everybody was just like staying away. So I think it was hard on everyone, but and even like, because normally when we move, we always like go right to church on Sunday and try and find a group of people to be friends. But that was also really different in Canada. It was different than other places we had been. The church that we went to was interesting. And there just wasn't, we didn't find anybody that wanted to kind of get out of their comfort zone, which is fine, to each their own. But Andy and I are extremely social people. So for us, some people recharge by going and being alone. For us, we go and be around people, and that's what makes us feel good. So it was really hard because even like our normal people that we would just automatically be able to jump into a group with in church, we couldn't even do that. So it was hard. I mean, and I couldn't even go back over the border because they when did they close the border? So it wasn't even like, I could go home and then think that I could come back, because I was so afraid that if I did leave, I wouldn't ever be able to come back.
Yeah. I mean, it started to skyrocket the numbers in the US fairly quickly. After that, it just multiplied a lot. So they shut it down probably, I would say in April sometime, maybe.
It wasn't too soon after the stay-at-home order. I mean, it was pretty soon after, I feel like.
And it's good that you kind of mentioned what you did before, because that was going to be my next, what I was going to discuss with you next, was that a lot of people just assume it's the same with Australia, New Zealand, the US, and Canada. Like, people who have never lived in those countries assume that they literally are one and the same culture. And yes, the accents are really similar. Yes, they're very close countries. Yes, a lot of the base concepts or aspects are similar in those countries. They share some brands and some franchises, but actually the people in these different countries are quite different. And as you mentioned, they didn't want to come out of their comfort zone. And I'm not saying this is for all Canadians, but even Canadians told me in some terms, they are sort of very they're much more reserved than Americans. Like, you can walk into any bar in the US and somebody will talk to you like you're a friend.
Yeah.
Whereas the Canadians are a far more reserved culture, and you've kind of got to prove yourself to them in some respects to sort of get that friendship going. So I know what you mean, because it was hard work for me as well. I mean, I went to an event, a Christmas party in December, and just had no contact from that party for 3 months from anybody. So whereas when I was in the US, the first place I went to, a bunch of people gave me their numbers and I was invited to parties, and like my social world just kicked off like a skyrocket.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you've been in Texas, so like Southern culture, and that's where I grew up, is Southern culture. I mean, you go to the grocery store and you make a new friend. Like, it's just
hell, it might not be the friend you want, but
And it's not that people aren't nice in Canada. I think people are extremely nice in Canada, but I also just think, especially in London, where we are, a lot of people have grown up in London. They have their group of friends they've had their whole life, and it's cliquey. They're very cliquey there.
Yeah.
And so for me, that was hard, because I also am not, you're way better than I am about it. I want things to just kind of happen like organically. Like, I feel like if we're going to be best friends, we will automatically be friends from the beginning.
Right.
Like, it's hard for me to try and push a relationship. You and Andy are both really good at just like making people be your friends. For me, even though I'm social, I just want it to be instant. Like we're instant friends, and
Yeah.
that's kind of
But
how
look,
I
I mean,
am.
also
So
you've got 2 kids. They take a lot of your energy. I've been around you guys. I know how much energy they take. You've also got to remember that I've lived in 6 countries. I've had to push friendships
mhm.
again and again and again and again and again in order to build a support system. Perth in Western Australia is an extremely cliquey city. It was very kind of similar to London. It's just that London didn't have a lot of immigrants or expats, whereas Perth did. I made friends with Kiwis and with Brits and with some other people as well, South Africans who were used to kind of making friends. The actual Aussies that I made friends with took me a long time to really get close friendships with them. You sort of have to prove yourself, and I'm kind of used to doing that. But
Yeah.
I also agree with you that certain things should happen organically and easily. And as I've got older, I've kind of gone with that ideology. But I know you couldn't get out much because it kind of just, where you got there and it was like, boom, pandemic. But what differences did you find at the beginning between the 2 countries, and what shocked you the most?
I think one of the biggest differences that I have noticed just in like day-to-day kind of things in Canada to the US is how consumer driven the US is, and everything is catered to the consumer. So restaurants, stores, shopping, it is so just geared to the consumer. And in Canada, it's a little different. I feel like there's not as much crazy variety in the US. I feel like in the US, there's almost too much, like it's
Right.
overwhelming. And then in Canada, there's less choices. And I think that was weird for me at first because everything was so convenient in the US. Everything's open 24/7. Like you can always go get, a gallon of milk or a liter of milk, whatever. And like there's stuff, everybody is always out doing stuff in the US. 24/7 stuff is open. And I remember like the first holiday, everything was shut down. I was like, well, I needed to go get stuff today. I needed to go grocery shopping. And Walmart was closed, which was crazy to me. And at first it was frustrating because I just wasn't used to it. But then after a while, it was nice because I felt like on holidays, or it was just really focused on not being a consumer and just going out, going to the park, being with your family. And I really liked that after I got used to it. Because I mean, in the US, we're so used to like going, spending money, doing this, doing that. And I think I liked that it was a little bit slower moving in Canada, which is nice. So, but it took me a minute because I was not used to it.
The thing that I love about Canada for me personally is I kind of find it this sort of happy medium for me personally. I mean, I love the US, that we have discussed this so many times, and you're right, everything is open and everything is going. But at the same time, when you have that environment, it means that the poor guys that have to pull these shifts and work for this really crappy minimum wage and don't get a lot of vacation time, and they've got to pull these shifts to keep their jobs and pay their rent, really don't have a lot of rights to kind of stay home or take a break during this time. And Australia has less variety, I would say, and a little bit more shut down. In Perth, you'll find this crazy. I think I can't remember, it was like 2015, 16 maybe, they finally allowed stores to open on a Sunday in Perth. Like they weren't even allowed to open. And when they finally allowed it to open, it might have been 2014. I'm not sure. It was places were only allowed to be open from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. So, I mean, even Sunday shopping, you had to go to a tourist area on a Sunday. There were just a few places that were allowed tourist registrations where you could go and buy stuff on a Sunday, including groceries.
Yeah, see, that's crazy to me because I've always just been able to, even on holidays in the US, I mean, most big stores are open for even a portion of the day, if not all of it. So, I mean, if you're cooking Thanksgiving dinner and you forgot to grab green beans, I mean, you can go run to the store and get stuff. So, I mean, it's convenient, but I mean, I've worked those jobs, and it does suck when, you know, you feel like the rest of your family and your friends are being able to go gather and be together, and you don't get to do that. So I've been on the other side of that, and it does suck. So that is nice that it's like that in Canada. And I think they do really value, but I think I've noticed, I mean, I haven't been very many places in the world, but I just through reading and articles, I think the US is very different than the rest of the world in the sense of like, they don't value vacation time or time off. Like everywhere else sees it as like an important part of like life. It's important to take time for yourself and to rest.
Yes.
And to enjoy life. But the US is so just constantly going.
I mean, the US is the epitome of the capitalist system. I mean, it really is. I mean, it's built on churning out, keeping customers and churning, making money. So yes, I mean, it's not really built on, because I mean, you look at Australia, where most jobs now, you get 4 weeks annual leave a year for most jobs now. And I think Canada might be 3 or 4, I'm not sure. Whereas the US, the standard is 2 weeks annual leave. And I've got a lot of young US friends that taught with me in Costa Rica that want to search for opportunities in other countries because they don't want, at least, you know, to spend years and years and years working for this tiny little bit of vacation time that they get, and long hours and that kind of thing.
Well, and even if you get the vacation time, a lot of times you feel guilty to take it. If you take it, it's seen as you being, you know, not as dedicated to your job. And I think that's very sad. I think that's very sad that people are so willing to just slowly kill themselves for a job, when at the end of the day, you know, that's not really what you need out of life. I mean, obviously they necessarily money, but
I don't think they necessarily want to. I think it comes in with government regulations, because if you look at Canada or Australia or New Zealand, who are all part of the Commonwealth system and you know, potentially, I think, operate on a kind of a different market, the government has said, look, companies, guess what? You can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, and you can't do this. Like, there are limits, there are thresholds. We are going to speak up for the needs of the people. And so if in the US there were government regulations that said, yeah, well, guess what? You can't do this and you can't work to this point, then companies would have to abide, and slowly the culture will change. I mean, look, I was born and raised in South Africa. If you got to work on time and left on time, people looked at you like you were a slacker, because you were expected to work many hours afterwards to show how dedicated you were. And when I went to New Zealand, I was like, oh my God, this is awesome, because people like arrive on time, they leave on time, and they will take their breaks.
Yeah, I think that's so important. Andy, he lived in Argentina for a while, and you know, they have after lunch, is it siesta, or so they get to like so, and it's like the whole area, everybody does it. I mean, nobody is going out and like knocking at people's doors. Nobody's like going to the stores. You are at home, you are resting. And I love that. I really like that. I mean, one, I like taking naps, but like, I just think it's really nice to just slow down. I think that's important for your body.
And look, I think this pandemic is going to change it. I mean, you and I have had this conversation privately, but I mean, I think this pandemic has shown a lot of people the other side of things. People have been working from home. They've been liking that arrangement. They've been liking the slower pace, even though the pandemic was difficult. I think the pandemic is basically here to start changing the way that we work people, and changing the way that we think about things. I mean, yes, people were very concerned about money in lower income jobs because they were expendable in some extent, you know, which was sad. And so they were worried. But mostly people were just concerned about their health and having
Mm-hmm.
somewhere to go. And that became more important than killing yourselves. People weren't spending money. They weren't going to the stores. The latest phone meant nothing to them at that time. The safety of their family and friends and themselves became more important.
I think it really forced everyone to take care of themselves more.
Yeah.
Like one way or another, it forced them to slow down. It forced them to take into account, what their body needed, or mentally what they needed, or what other family members needed, because they were around more. And I think, people don't have any other choice but to recognize those things. And, I think out of everything, I think that was a good thing that came out of the pandemic. Yeah. So I think that was good, because it really forced people to see what they needed out of life and what was really important. And I mean, hopefully, I hope a lot of that's here to stay. I know I have lots of friends who will continue working from home. They won't go back into the office, because I mean, it's not necessary. They don't have to be in the office to get their job done, and they're able to do their job from anywhere. I mean, I have a group of friends that have gone down and in Mexico or South America somewhere, and they've got a house together. They all pitch in for the rent, and they are working remotely, and they love it. And I think they have just really enjoyed that change.
A lot of people have, and a lot of my students, or a fair amount of my students, are in like IT or something like that, where they've been working remotely. I've had a lot of students who at the beginning of the pandemic hated it, didn't want to work from home. Those same students now are telling me they much prefer working at home. They've got used to it. They prefer it. It's a lot easier. A lot of my students in Turkey and Istanbul, they don't have to sit in that feral traffic every day, and they've changed their view. But I want to ask, do you remember when we met? Do you remember what month it was?
I do. I think it was it before Preston's birthday?
It was definitely
or was it
before
at
Preston's. No,
birthday?
It was definitely way before. You guys came over. You'd met Rich in a park, and you'd met them. You'd come over. He was making a barbecue for you. I'd gone out for nachos and margaritas with my little three amigo friends, and I had just come back in. And it was cooling down because y'all went to the swimming pool next door. It was still a bit chilly, but it was a lovely day. So I
changed into my swimsuit at your house.
Yes, in my upstairs bathroom in the little apartment. Yes, I saved you from the boys' bathroom. And so it must have been like late August, I'm assuming. Ish.
It was the summer. I know that. I'm so bad with dates.
Yeah,
but
I'm usually pretty good, but it must have been sort of late August, because I'd already gone and spent my time in Bruce Lake with my friend and that kind of thing. And it was so funny because we didn't really talk much. Kind of as I came in, Andy, who just chats. I mean, we kind of just started chatting, and then I had to go and change. I was going to go for a walk, and you guys were going to go next door. And then you came back from the swimming pool at exactly the same time that I was kind of crossing the street from my walk, and we just stood in that driveway and we talked. And Rich said, "You talk for a living. How can you talk so much?" And you and I, darling, just like imploded on each other. It was just like we just so needed that, and we just couldn't stop talking. And Andy's going,
I remember,
we should get the kids home.
I know, it was hilarious because Rich was like, that's more than Alyssa has ever talked around me ever. And Andy's like, we've been waiting forever to go. But that's what I mean. It was just so instant. And because all I really knew about you at that point was what Rich had told me is that you are a lesbian and that you like cats. And I was like, off of those
I love that
things,
that's what he led with.
Yeah. And I was like, perfect. that's my people right there. So
Oh my God,
so
it was
it's
so
perfect.
funny. It was so funny. It's so funny because I love it because like Rich, I would be around Rich. And for those listening, he was my landlord. He was the guy who owned the house, and I love Rich, but I would be around him when he tells somebody else about a story I told him or something about my life. And I'm like, no, that's not quite right. But I would just keep quiet and just let him tell the story.
Yeah, no, it was so funny because we would go over and Andy makes friends. Like him and Rich met at the park and he came home. He's like, I found a new friend. We can go hang out. He has a kid. I was like, oh, right. Like I'll go. And I really hadn't talked much at the cookout or anything because I don't like to force conversation if I don't feel like there's anything I want to say. Like I just am not that type of person. So I was just content to listen and that was fine. But like as soon as we started talking, I'm pretty sure we were talking about
Everything.
like politics and just like people needing to be nice to one another.
We were, and we
how
were
there just
talking
needs to be more
about the South.
compassion.
Because, you know, the
Yeah.
South has this terrible view, like internationally and in Canada. And it's so sad because, you know, I'll put on my Southern accent and I never put it on to make fun. I love it. Like if I could trade my accent for like them on a good old Southern accent tomorrow, I would, because I love it. And the South is so special to me. And you're originally from Virginia, and it's just incredible place. Yes, there's negative stuff. There's negative stuff everywhere, but there's just something wonderful that I love about the South. And I think also it was just so nice for me to talk to you because it was just somebody who understood the South when I was in a place where, you know, it was during the Trump presidency and there was just so much negativity going on. And, you know, I was getting little quips and stuff. And I just wanted to be with somebody who also just loved, you know, the Southern hospitality and that kind of thing. So we chatted about politics and the South, and yes, kindness and everything.
Yes.
And then we were like making a friend date. Like you make sure Andy gives your number. Like I'll give my number to Andy, and Andy will give his number to you. And then it was under a week, and we had a date for a wine evening.
Yes, and it was so nice. It was the first time since going to Canada that I felt that I really connected with somebody that I could really be real friends with, not just like, you know, oh, if you need a cup of sugar or anything like that. It was like a real friendship and somebody that actually understood me, and I'd be able to say my opinions without like fear of what people would think. And I mean, I so loved every conversation we have because I felt so heard. And I think that was so important because after just being so isolated, I mean, I just needed to talk someone's ear off. So it was good.
And it was wonderful. And then, I mean, that basement, oh my God, I love that basement. I miss it so much. You know, I'd come over and Andy he's a good guy. I mean, he would kind of take the kids and let us just bend each other's ear, and he'd get them bathed and he'd put them to bed. And then he would come down and join us. And he was my little Bud Light partner in drinking, or I'd have some wine with you, and then we would just talk. And it was good for me because I've lived in the US and I understand the US, and I don't know, there's a part of me that feels very American, and I understand Americans. And you know, you just have a conversation where there's just, as you say, there's just you don't need to censor yourself. You can just be the person you are. And you don't have to apologize for anything. You don't have to explain anything. We understood each other. And it was just wonderful.
It was so good. And I think even for Andy, it was so needed as well, because Andy has felt, I think, since moving to Canada, that he couldn't say a lot of his opinions, whether politically or just about really anything, because he feels really different. And I think, you know, he doesn't want people to think that he's some like raging American, because he's not, but like, you know, so I think he's had a hard time with that because he's felt like he's had to censor himself daily, like at work and things like that. And I think he loved when you would come over because he felt like he could actually have a conversation and you guys could talk about, you know, differing like viewpoints and stuff like that, but it was a safe place.
And we
I
never
think,
attacked each other. I mean, we could agree to
yeah.
disagree on these little points. We never felt badly about each other if there was something we didn't agree on. For the most part, we kind of all agreed on pretty much everything. There's just a few differences in how you view something based on your culture, but we kind of opened each other. And then Andy, of course, just loved the fact that in South Africa, traffic lights are called robots. And I think everybody just loves that. And he loves weird words. And then, oh, we had some great time. And you and I went out together on days I wasn't teaching. And then now we get to the horrible part. I left. On the 6th of December, I abandoned you, and I abandoned a part of myself as I did. And I was not prepared for returning to my home country and feeling like I did not belong anymore. I did not realize how much I had changed in the last 3 years and how different. And I felt like a foreigner, and I just went into a depression, complete depression.
Yeah. And I think it was also hard because we had just come off of like Thanksgiving, like you had come over for Thanksgiving, and we had spent, you know, all that time together right before you left. And then it was just like, then you were gone. And I also think like, because I think it was good for you to go because you wanted to spend some time with your parents. But also, I mean, it's true. I think we grow up. And I love where I grew up, but I also would never live there again. Like I would never go back and live there ever. Like, I mean, I think majority of people, if they think about like teenage years and like trying to find themselves, like it's necessary and it was important we had those experiences, but we don't necessarily want to relive them ever. And I think it's hard. Like for me, if I had to go back and live in Chesapeake, I would be miserable. I'd be miserable there. And it's just because it's not where I've lived in so many other places that I have really loved. And that's not where I want to be. I'll go visit.
You find your place. It's where you find your place. And I agree. And we're supposed to grow. We're supposed to grow and develop and change who we are and change our ideals. I mean, you and I have a similarity in the respect of we were raised in sort of more right-leaning kind of environments. You know, South Africa had apartheid and it was known for being, and I was raised in a very racist environment. And I have just become like almost the complete opposite of that. And I'm very happy that I've become the complete opposite of that. I would never want to stay in that or be that ever. So, you know, you grow and you just become a better version of yourself, I think. But just tell me and all of us listening, what happened after I left? Like, what happened with you? I mean, I know that you really struggled.
After you left, I really didn't have, I mean, other than Andy and my kids, there wasn't really anyone that I felt like was a true friend. There was, you know, a mom that I would hang out with that had young kids as well, but it was different in the sense of, you know, it wasn't that deep connection of where you're just like 100% yourself. It was still very much, you know, being polite. And nothing against her, but it was also just, I think I really just, I withdrew from, you know, even people that were offering to come over. I couldn't put the energy forth to even do it. And that happens with like depression. You just don't have the energy to
And then I just want to interject that at the same time, because you and I know this, but the listeners don't, Canada then entered very stringent lockdowns. Like I left on the 6th of December. We'd all gone in the car and seen the amazing Christmas lights before. Just shortly after I left, you guys were able to go to Niagara for a night and see the beautiful lights there. And then because of what happened, you know, with the cases going up after, you know, Canadian Thanksgiving, which is a month earlier than US, and Halloween, that things just started to shut down. Boom, like the strictest lockdowns that Ontario had gone into as well.
And it was so hard because I think after we had the summer and then things felt like they were getting better. And I think people were in general feeling better about the situation. And then it was just, they threw us right back in. It wasn't a gentle,
I know.
it wasn't gentle how they threw us back into it. And so it was really hard because at that point it was just like, well, what's the point anymore? And that's what it felt like. I mean, it was like, well, I'm not going anywhere. Might as not shower today. Like, that's so gross, but it was like, what's the point of putting on real clothes? I'll just stay in my pajamas. And like, it wasn't even slowly and surely, but it just progressed into, I mean, for me, I was just so down because there was nothing to look forward to in my eyes. It just felt like an endless nothing is what it really felt like, because it was like, because they would give us dates and then they would just extend it. So whether they gave us a date or not, of whether things would open back up or what time, you couldn't count on that. So there was nothing to even look forward to. I mean, I've said time and time again, if I just knew the date that everything would be open, or that stuff would be more normal, then I could say, okay, I just have to make it through to this date. But since we never had that, it was really hard to push through because you just never knew how long it was going to be.
Plus, it was also the winter. Canadian winters are extremely long. You're not used to the length of that.
So cold.
Right. So it was a very cold winter after a very mild one the year before that I had lived through. The winters are very long, so you do feel like really bad. I mean, and then they shut parks, I think, for a while or something like that.
They shut the parks down, which was hard because, I mean, with kids, that was literally all we had to do was like go to the parks. And even in the snow, it was like, well, at least they can go play in the snow at the park or do that. And it was just, so it was really hard because there was nothing even for my kids. Like Ellie, my oldest, she's had a hard time because she's so social and she has a lot of energy, and she was so used to us having a routine each week where we did all these things and then it went to nothing. And so it was really hard for her to adjust as well. And I think that added to my feeling of despair because it was like, I felt like I was failing at everything. I was failing at being a mom. I was failing at being a spouse. I felt like I was failing at taking care of my own self. Like it was really hard. And I mean, Andy was so good. He's like always like the person to lean on. I mean, he would cook dinner, he would clean the house. I just couldn't even, I mean, I really just could barely take care of myself. I was doing good enough to make sure everybody was like fed and like relatively clean. That was like all I could do for a while. So.
And I mean, I so feel you because, I mean, we have different circumstances in that I'm not married. I don't have children. I came back here with my family, but I felt that I had gone from supreme belonging. North America is just where my soul smiles and I just love it. And even during lockdown days and stuff like that, I'd go for a walk and it was beautiful. And I'd see the kids getting on the little yellow buses and I'd come to see you guys and it was amazing. And then I came back to not being understood. My accent had changed a little bit because I've been teaching American English for so long. I have these little Americanisms in the way that I speak, and I just felt so different, you know, and it's beautiful here. Nothing was really locked down. I had all the freedom in the world. It's a beautiful area of the world, and it doesn't matter how much beauty surrounds you when you are just in a depression. I kept my teaching schedule because I needed to make money. That was the only reason. I stopped writing. I couldn't write anymore, really. I wrote for a bit and then I just kind of stopped. I just couldn't. I wasn't in the space where I could even elicit feelings enough to continue writing my book. I spent a lot of time in my room. And I understand what you're saying. And it was just terrible. And we sent each other these sad little messages when we actually pulled ourselves out long enough to go, oh my God, we need. And, you know, you can talk to somebody online. And that has been such a saving grace for me, this podcast. And I've loved it. But nothing beats sitting next to somebody that you love and that you can hug and that you can just laugh with and you can have that like immediate connection with.
Mm-hmm. And we did finally make some good friends. They go to our church, but their oldest daughter babysits for me when we go out on date night. And they have 3 girls, and they're really great people. But they're like you, they just like love America. Like, so like we felt like we could be ourselves, and that was really good. And that really helped. And that helped once we finally were able to like, just making that like one family of friends, made a huge difference. And I think that's like the biggest thing is like, it's not even that I needed like a ton of people. I just needed a person, like one person. Like when you were there, that was like you, like we were always like getting together, and that was, the thing. And so I think it was just until I could finally, and it did reach a head. It wasn't just like making friends. I really just had gotten to a point where I was so down, and like Andy didn't know what to do, and I couldn't help my own self. Mm-hmm. And I finally, and I feel really bad. I feel like there's a lot that I've missed out on in the last year because I couldn't get out of my own way because of the depression. But then, I think, it's something I had to go through. I mean, we can't just look back and think about how horrible it is, because it was, but at the same time, like I've gone through it. Yes. Now I'm trying to, like, when I think of the positives, it did force me to finally do counseling online. I did that like BetterHelp counseling. Cool. I'm like still doing it, and I love it. And and I love it. Like my counselor is this like really awesome lady from Louisiana. And like, she's just awesome. And I had to learn how to love myself, take care of myself. And it started off really, really primary, like taking a shower every day, like just putting on normal clothes, not staying in pajamas all day. Mm. And it started off, I just had to be kinder to myself and stop thinking about all the negative, because I got so fixated on it.
You do. And I mean, I agree with you. Like, I became so, I understand. I wanted to get myself out of it. And I have the mental health training. I mean, I studied for 6 years to be a psychologist, and I've done a lot of spiritual work, and I did a lot of the practices that I needed, but I just, it's amazing. I mean, for anybody that's listening that knows Abraham Maslow's triangle, and you've got to move up it, and belonging is basically, I think, sort of above food, water, and shelter. And when you don't feel that you belong, it will just rock your foundations. Yeah, I mean, I'm so, so, so glad that you kind of have been able to come out of it and have some support. And I mean, I long for the day when I can get back and yeah, I mean, it'll just be so much easier. And this pandemic has touched everybody. I mean, even if you think you're untouchable, it's touched everybody one way or another. And I was a little bit arrogant. I mean, I was loving it when I was in the US. I had the Three Musketeers, and you and I met, and we had some great times. I was still working. I was writing my book. And I thought, and then I came back here, and the pandemic went, okay, it's time to pay up now.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely touched everybody. And I think I'm hoping that means that everybody will be a little bit kinder to everyone else, because like we've all had to go through the same thing. I think obviously in life everybody has different circumstances, but this last year nobody could escape it. Like nobody could escape what has happened with COVID and how that has changed people's lives. Like, I mean, we have family friends back in Washington, their dad, who was only, he was only in his 40s. He passed away from COVID, and he was healthy before. And it's like their lives has changed. I just think nobody was safe from it. And I think it's really made people have to stop and think about what's important. What do I really need to be doing with my life? And so I think it's been good. I mean, for me, I've come out stronger. I mean, it's still a journey. I'm still on that journey, but I feel like I'm coming out stronger because even before I was so involved in taking care of everyone else, which is not a bad thing, but at the same time, I was not really taking care of myself either before the pandemic. I was so, what do I need to do for the kids? What do I need to do for Andy? What do I need to do for my extended family who doesn't even really need my help, but I always seem to feel like I need to like insert myself to help people. Like, even if they don't need it, like, I don't know why, and I think I had lost myself. And that happens a lot of time too, like in motherhood. A lot of people, they only see themselves as a mother, and that's such a great role. But at the same time, it's not my only role in life. I'm not just mom. I'm Alyssa, and I have my own likes, and I have my own hobbies and things that I like to do away from my family. And that's okay. But I had such guilt to ever do that before. And then really the only thing that has really helped me, get past, my depression and kind of pull myself out of this hole is spending that time on myself, finding what I like to do, what I want to do, and who is Alyssa? Like, I forgot for a while who I was.
And a lot of mothers do that. And then they reach a certain point where like their kids are going to school and then they've got some time and they don't know who they are anymore. And I will say that it's very important for your children to also understand that you are your own person. I mean, I had an ex-partner who said they were well cared for. Their parents were amazing parents, but in that household, they always knew that the primary relationship was between the mother and the father. And that relationship needed to remain strong. And your kids, if they believe that they're the world in a lot of respects, they don't learn to grow up and realize that other people are there and other people matter, and that your mother matters, and that she can go off and do a few things and you'll be just fine. And so it's also important for kids to realize that there's a bit of a separation. When they're very young, they don't understand that concept, but as they get older, it's something that they desperately need to learn.
Well, and I think, I mean, I say that because of motherhood, because that's my experience, but I think it just goes into everything. Like Andy, he is an extremely hard worker and he will give everything to work because that's just who he is. And then, I've had to tell him, I'm like, you need to take some time for you. You need to take a day off from work and you need to go do what makes Andy happy. And he loves fishing. He's like obsessed.
I know.
But that's like, he said, like for him, that's been like his church this last year has been going out and fishing and just being able to push everything else away and really relax. So I think it's such an important concept to just take time for yourself. And it's okay to, I hate using the word be selfish because it's not selfish to take care of yourself.
It's self-care.
Yeah. But especially growing up, my parents are amazing parents, but I think just in my culture, it is, you're always working and doing all these things. And like the last person you take care of is yourself. And I don't think that's right, because at the end of the day, my mom loves to tell me, you can't fill other people's cup with your pitcher if your pitcher's empty. Like if you love taking care of people, or if you love, being around other people, no matter how much you love that, you won't be able to do it if you are empty yourself.
No, you can't. So. And even if you tried, what you're able to deliver is sometimes not even what they need, because, or they can just feel that there's something there that it's just not. But the last question that I want to ask you is, I find this one quite interesting. Has the pandemic radically shifted or changed like any core beliefs that you have or how you view the world?
I definitely think it does, because I think I've been steadily changing my views on things since I have left home. Obviously, when you're young and a teenager, you really take on all your beliefs, and your processes are coming from what you've been raised in.
Mhm.
But I mean, when I left the home, things did start changing. And I think everything really came to a head during the pandemic, because during the pandemic, I mean, in the US, we've had an election, we've had, there's just been a lot that's gone on in my own home country. And then even in Canada, a lot of stuff that has happened there. And I think it's really forced people to, I think, look at other people. I think I was aware that everybody has their own struggles before, but I still was very much of like, I think I was like, well, if you just work hard enough, like you'll be fine. But that's not always true. And it's really made me want to be more compassionate towards people and try not be so judgy. I
Mhm.
think everyone judges, like
Yes.
nobody is
Yes.
safe from that. I think everybody judges to an extent, just some more than others.
Mhm.
And even though I felt like before the pandemic, I felt like enlightened, or I was not as like judgy or whatever as like most of the people from back home, there was still growing that I needed to do, because I I think it was just realizing that at the end of the day, like, especially anywhere in the world, like, we are all people, like, we are all struggling, and
Mhm.
and it's not even like one person's is worse than the other,
No.
because I mean, for each person, that struggle is really hard. And I mean, it's really made me, I think, just think more about other people more so than I ever have in my life, because and just through my own self-reflection about my own self, I've learned a lot about myself, and in turn that's made me think about other people. Does that make sense?
It
I don't
does.
know.
And I absolutely love that that's your answer. I really do, because I think it's amazing. And you are so right. And I've discussed this with my students before, with people being at home, people that are okay, kept their jobs or whatever. What have you had to do? Nothing but pay more attention to kind of what's going on in your country, in your world, in other countries. We've had this, and you're right, so much has changed and erupted during this pandemic. And maybe you know, maybe it was the same as before the pandemic, but we've been paying attention to it, and things have, the Black Lives movement, Black
Mhm.
Lives Matter movement kind of got, I think, a lot more traction during this time than it had unfortunately been able to do before. And in the US, they didn't want to raise minimum wage, and then they were relying on all of these people that were earning minimum wage, that they didn't want to raise these salaries, and those were the people that the entire country was relying on, and not just there, in every country. And it's just that all of these things kind of came to a head, and we all sat back going, okay, I've been so involved in my own world that I haven't noticed what's going on. And I've got Belarusian students and Turkish students and Russian students and Brazilian students, where a lot of issues with the government have been going on there and trying to be resolved. And personally, it's been such a tough time for a lot of us, but it kind of needed to happen. And I agree with you. I think kindness will grow. I think it already has. And I think change will grow out of this. And it's a difficult time for all of us to live through, but I have so much hope now. I had very little hope before. I even remember a conversation that I was having with a student, and I have so much more hope for the world now.
Yeah, that was actually, I think, our first conversation in
Yeah.
the
Driveway.
driveway. I mean, I said the same thing. I was like, I hope this means that people will be more aware,
Mm.
and but I was still very afraid that like things would just go right back to the way they were before. But I think even though I really wanted the pandemic to be over a lot faster
Mm,
than it's been, I
yeah.
think honestly it needed to be long, because now people can't forget. It had to be shoved in front of their face
Right.
for them to realize, for them to actually just get out of their own way to see other people,
Mm,
to see what is happening around the world, because we get so involved in our own little bubble and nothing else matters. And that's what it was like before the pandemic, is like, well, if it's not affecting me, then I don't care, right?
right.
Because it shouldn't matter to me because it doesn't bother me.
Mhm.
But just because it doesn't bother you doesn't mean that it doesn't bother your neighbor or your friend or family member or anything like that. And I just think it had to be pushed in front of us with
Did.
no other option but to look at it, to see it, in order for there to be any change, any kind of change.
Look, I agree with you. And I know, like, I lived through South Africa when apartheid ended. And I'm just saying that I've lived in different countries where different things have happened. And I know the feeling of that stone has started rolling. And no matter what you shove in front of it, it's gathering steam. You might be able to slow it down, but I know that feeling of where it's kind of tipped over the scales and there's no returning from that. And with quite a few things around the world now, I feel it's tipped, it's gone over the tipping point. Like, no matter how much people want to stop certain things, it's not going to stop. It's moved into a completely different energy now, and it progresses. It's moving forward.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you only grow through discomfort. I
True.
mean, anybody that's comfortable is not going to grow, because why grow, right? There's no point in doing it if you're
Exactly.
comfortable. So even though it was so hard for me and everybody, but like, just speaking for my own self, it was really hard. But I feel like I'm learning who I am now. And I think I don't want to be the old Alyssa anymore. I just want to be who I am now. And I like that.
I love that. I love that. Oh my God, that's the perfect thing to end on. I love that. And I'm so thankful that you came on here, and I love you and I miss you, and hopefully I will see you again soon. We're making plans. I'm making plans to break out my escape. Yes, I'm making, not told my listeners yet, but yes, I'm planning my breakout, and it looks like it might be Mexico. So yes, hopefully it will be soon. And thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
It's been great. I'm so excited. And thank you all for listening. And if you want to see the video version of this podcast and you're listening to the audio version, please go to my YouTube channel, International Immigrant, and subscribe so that you get all of the updates whenever I add a new video. Please also head over to my Instagram page, international__immigrant. And for those of you listening to this podcast, please subscribe to be notified when I release new episodes. If you have any questions and you'd like me to answer them in future episodes, please feel free to ask in the comments sections on any of my platforms. And from my international immigrant journey to yours, see you next time.